Have you ever like thought to yourself, man, I just want to speak English like a native speaker? I know I have. And it turns out it's a super common goal for like language learners.
Yeah.
So today, we're going to do a deep dive into this whole idea
Okay.
with the help of a video from a language instructor who has kind of a surprising take on this topic.
Interesting.
She actually used to teach with this whole like speak like a native focus, but has completely like changed her approach.
Wow.
So get ready because we're about to unpack why this seemingly natural goal might actually be holding you back.
I'm intrigued. This idea of speaking like a native is so pervasive. Like, it makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Where it comes from and why it, like, holds so much power over us as learners.
Right. And in the video, the instructor like kicks things off by asking us to really define what speaking like a native even means.
Yeah.
It's like, what does that even mean?
Right.
Is it about having a perfect accent,
Yeah.
using all the latest slang, or maybe it's about never making a single grammar mistake?
Right.
It seems like it could mean something totally different to each of us.
And even if we could, like, agree on a definition, there's so much diversity within native speakers.
That's true.
Like, think about all the different accents and dialect just within English alone.
Yeah.
Like, which native are we even aiming for?
That's so true. I've definitely like fallen into that crap myself. I remember spending hours trying to mimic certain accents, and honestly, it just made me feel more self-conscious.
I can relate to that.
How about you? Did you ever have this speak like a native goal when you were learning English?
I don't know that I explicitly thought speak like a native,
Yeah.
but I definitely had this desire to
Yeah,
fit in, to sound like I belonged,
right.
which I guess is kind of the same thing.
It is. Yeah. It's like this deep-seated desire for acceptance.
For sure.
The instructor in this video actually talks about that very feeling.
Oh, wow.
She shares how she spent years trying to perfect her own accent and how any comment about it would really upset her.
I can imagine that would be really hurtful.
Yeah, to the point of tears.
Wow. It just goes to show how much pressure we often put on ourselves to conform,
Yeah,
even if it means sacrificing our own sense of self.
exactly.
Striving for like an then attainable standard of perfection can be so damaging to our confidence.
And that's a key point she makes in the video, this idea of speak like a native being a trap.
Right.
Because perfection simply doesn't exist.
Yeah.
In fact, she argues that this mindset can actually hinder your progress.
It's like that saying, perfect is the enemy of good.
Oh, I like that.
Think about it. Like, in any area of life, when
Yeah.
we get so fixated on some like idealized version of perfection,
Right.
they could actually prevent us from like taking risks, making mistakes, and ultimately
Yeah.
learning and growing.
The instructor uses her own experience to illustrate this point.
Okay.
She talks about how she used to create language lessons that were all about avoiding errors and sounding perfect.
Oh, interesting.
But then she realized that this was actually reinforcing the very fears
Right.
she was trying to help learners overcome.
Yeah. It's like she was accidentally making the problem worse
Yeah.
by trying to prevent it.
Exactly. So she had this like major realization
Uh-huh.
and decided to completely shift her teaching philosophy.
Okay, I'm ready for this shift.
So instead of pushing this idea of more English, more English, more English,
Right.
she started focusing on something totally different.
Interesting. What was it?
So she realized that effective communication isn't about sounding exactly like a native speaker,
Okay.
but it's about developing strong communication strategies, understanding frameworks for like clear expression,
Makes sense.
and most importantly, addressing those underlying psychological blocks that hold us back,
That's huge.
right? Because think about it. Even native speakers can struggle to communicate
Yeah,
if they lack confidence or they haven't developed those crucial skills for expressing themselves clearly.
for sure.
It's not just about the language itself,
Right. It's about the whole package.
right? And you know what's really interesting?
What?
She talks about how she started applying this new approach with her clients,
Okay.
and the results were pretty remarkable.
What kind of results are we talking?
She says that her clients is seeing massive improvements in their communication.
Wow.
And get this, within just a week.
That's amazing.
All this without obsessing over grammar rules
Wow.
or memorizing tons of new vocabulary.
It really makes you wonder if we've been approaching language learning all wrong.
Yeah.
Like focusing too much on the technicalities
Uh-huh.
and not enough on the like underlying psychology and strategies
Exactly.
that drive effective communication.
I know, right? It's like a total paradigm shift.
It is.
And here's where it gets even more fascinating.
Okay, lay it on me.
She observed that learners who were already at an intermediate or advanced level
Okay.
often didn't need more English lessons.
Interesting. What were they missing then?
She realized they were struggling to access and apply the knowledge they already had
Okay.
because of those psychological barriers we talked about,
Right.
or because they lacked those effective communication strategies.
So it's like having all the ingredients,
Yes,
but not knowing how to cook.
that's such a great way to put it. It's like
Yeah.
You have all these tools in your toolbox, but you either don't know how to use them or you're afraid to.
Exactly.
And she really challenges learners to think about what they truly need
Yeah,
to improve their communication.
right.
It's not always about adding more and more English.
Uh-huh.
It's about learning how to use what you already know in a confident and effective way.
I think that's a message a lot of us need to hear.
Yeah,
It's easy to get caught up in the endless pursuit of more vocabulary, more grammar rules,
right.
but maybe the key to unlocking fluency lies in something deeper,
Totally.
something more fundamental about how we approach communication itself.
Absolutely. And she even critiques those standardized language levels,
You mean like
like
yeah,
B1,
a
B
bit.
to C1,
Yeah.
arguing that they're outdated
Interesting.
and don't actually prepare you for the messy, unpredictable world
Right.
of real-life communication.
I can definitely see her point.
Yeah.
Those tests often focus on very specific aspects of language,
Right.
but they don't necessarily reflect how we actually use language in everyday conversations.
Exactly.
Or in those like high-pressure situations,
Yeah.
like giving a presentation or leading a meeting.
And speaking of those high-pressure situations,
Yeah.
she specifically mentions how traditional language learning often fails to equip people to handle them effectively.
It's true. When you're in a stressful situation like a job interview
Right.
or a big presentation, suddenly it's not about perfectly conjugating verbs. It's about
Right.
being able to convey your message clearly and confidently,
Yes.
even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
And that's where those communication strategies and that inner confidence really come into play.
Sure.
It's about going beyond just the words themselves
Yeah.
and understanding the nuances of how we communicate, both verbally and non-verbally.
So it's more than just what you say,
Uh-huh.
but how you say it.
Right.
Things like body language tone, a voice active listening.
Yeah.
All of these play a huge role in effective communication.
Exactly. And the instructor shares her own experience, saying that things really clicked for her.
Oh, cool.
When she started learning these communication strategies and frameworks, it was like a light bulb went off, and she was finally able to express herself more effectively.
I love those aha moments.
Yeah. And this new approach really contrasts with what she sees as a lot of fear-mongering happening in the language learning industry.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's almost like some parts of the industry profit from making learners feel insecure.
Yeah, like they need to buy more products to fix their English.
Exactly. And she calls out those clickbait headlines
Oh, I hate those.
that prey on our fears, like "stop making this mistake" or "native speakers never say this."
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
She even admit that she used to create that kind of content herself.
Wow, that's honest.
Yeah. It takes a lot of courage to admit that.
It does.
And she challenges all of us as language learners
Yeah.
to pay attention to how different types of content make us feel.
Okay.
If a video or an article is making you feel bad about your language skills,
Right.
she says it's probably not helping you.
That's good advice.
And this is where the idea of challenging our beliefs comes in.
Okay.
She argues that if we want to break free from that fear-based mindset,
Yeah.
we need to question those limiting beliefs we've internalized about language learning and about ourselves.
I like that. It's about recognizing that confidence comes from within.
Yes. And that shift in mindset, she says, can lead to action.
Okay.
When we start to believe in ourselves, we're more likely to take risks,
Yeah.
to step outside of our comfort zones,
Right.
and to embrace those opportunities for growth.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It does.
The more we believe it ourselves, the more we're likely to achieve.
Exactly.
Which further reinforces that belief and propels us forward.
It's like a beautiful cycle of growth and empowerment.
It is.
And she talks about how this is what she's now committed to fostering in her own work.
That's great.
She's moving away from those superficial tips and tricks
Yeah.
and focusing on helping learners develop those deeper communication skills and cultivate a more confident mindset.
It sounds like she's really passionate about creating a more supportive and empowering learning environment.
Absolutely. She ends the video by inviting viewers to reach out to her and share their biggest communication challenges.
Wow, that's generous.
Yeah, she says she's there to help them find their own voice and communicate authentically without the fear and self-doubt that often hold learners back.
It's a truly inspiring message.
It is.
It makes you want to reevaluate your own learning journey and consider what changes you might want to make
Yeah,
to approach language learning with more confidence and joy.
I couldn't agree more. This video has definitely given me a lot to think about, both in terms of my own language learning experiences and how we can create a more supportive and empowering learning environment for everyone.
It's definitely a call to action.
It is.
A call to question those limiting beliefs,
Yeah.
to embrace new approaches,
Right.
and to find joy in the process of communication regardless of our perceived fluency level.
Beautifully said. Now, before we go any further, I want to pause here and ask you and everyone listening, A question that the video didn't explicitly address, but it's something I can't stop thinking about. What if focusing less on the technicalities of the English language,
Okay.
on all those grammar rules and vocabulary lists,
Yeah.
and more on those communication strategies,
Right.
and building that inner confidence actually unlocked a level of fluency and ease that we never thought possible?
That's a fascinating question.
It really challenges us to rethink our assumptions about what it means to be fluent.
Yeah, it does.
We'll dive deeper into this idea and more of the instructor's insights right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's one thing to hear someone say focus on communication, not perfection,
Right.
but it's another to actually, see it work.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what's so compelling about the approach she outlines in this video.
It's one thing to talk the talk,
Yeah,
but it's another to talk the walk.
exactly. And she shares some pretty amazing stories about the transformation she witnessed firsthand.
Oh, cool. I like a good transformation story.
She talks about how she started working with clients individually and in small groups,
Okay.
and the results were, in her words, unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Okay, now I'm really curious. What made these results so unbelievable?
Well, here's the really interesting part.
Okay.
She wasn't teaching traditional English lessons at all.
Really?
In fact, she emphasizes that English was only used about 1% of the time.
1%. Wow, that's a radical shift in how we usually think about language learning.
Instead of grammar drills or vocabulary lists,
Right.
they were focusing on what she calls the missing pieces.
Okay, the missing pieces, I like that. What are those?
Things like communication strategies, frameworks for clear expression, and those all-important psychological blocks that we often overlook.
It's true. We often assume that if you just know enough English words and grammar,
Right.
you'll automatically be a good communicator.
Yeah, like it should just magically happen.
Right? But even native speakers can struggle
Totally.
if they lack the confidence or the tools to express themselves effectively.
Think about it. You could know every grammar rule in the book,
Right.
but still freeze up in a job interview or struggle to get your point across in a meeting.
Absolutely. It highlights how crucial those other aspects of communication are.
Yeah.
Like it's about having strategies for staying calm under pressure,
Right.
for structuring your thoughts logically,
Uh-huh.
for engaging your audience. It's not just about the words themselves.
And the crazy thing is, her clients were seeing these amazing results.
Yeah.
It's just a week,
Wow.
even though they weren't spending hours drilling verb tenses or memorizing vocabulary.
That's wild. It's like a testament to the power of mindset and communication strategies.
I know, right? It's like you're saying, you already have the ingredients, now let's learn how to cook.
Exactly.
And she makes another really interesting point.
Okay.
Says that learners who are already at an intermediate or advanced level often don't need more English lessons.
That's interesting. So what are they missing then? If they already have a solid foundation, why are they still struggling?
She realized that they might be struggling to access and apply the knowledge they already have
Okay.
because of those psychological blocks.
Right, like the fear of making mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. Or because they haven't developed the right communication strategies.
So it's not about adding more and more information. It's about learning how to use what you already know in a confident and effective way.
That's it. That's the key takeaway. And this kind of reminds me of something we were talking about earlier,
What's that?
about how those standardized language levels like B1 or C1
Yeah.
can actually be kind of misleading
Yeah.
because they don't necessarily reflect your ability to communicate effectively
Right. In real life situations.
in real world situations. Yeah,
You could ace a grammar test and still struggle to hold a conversation or give a presentation.
totally. It's like having a driver's license but never actually getting behind the wheel.
Perfect analogy.
And I think that's where those communication strategies and frameworks come in.
Okay.
They're like the missing link between knowledge and fluency.
So what kind of strategies are we talking about? Can you give me some examples?
Well, she talks about the importance of things like body language
Okay.
and tone of voice.
Yeah.
Even if your English is perfect, if your body language is closed off or your tone is hesitant,
Right.
your message might not come across effectively.
It's true. Sometimes we get so caught up in finding the right words
Yeah,
that we forget about all those other subtle cues
Right.
that play a huge role in how we communicate.
absolutely. And she also emphasizes the importance of having clear communication structures.
Okay.
For example, if you're giving a presentation,
Right.
having a clear beginning, middle, and end can make a huge difference in how your message is received.
It's about having a framework for organizing your thoughts
Yes,
and delivering them in a way that's engaging and easy to follow. It's like having a roadmap for your communication so you don't get lost along the way.
I love that. A roadmap for your communication.
Right.
So you don't get lost.
Exactly.
And she even provides some specific examples of frameworks that you can use in different situations.
Oh, that's helpful.
Like she talks about a framework called PrEP.
prep.
that can be really helpful for answering questions confidently and concisely.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that she's giving concrete tools that listeners can actually apply
Right.
in their own lives.
And remember how we were talking about how traditional language learning often fails to prepare us for those high-pressure situations?
Oh, yeah. The job interviews, the presentations.
She actually addresses that head-on.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
That was one of the areas where I felt like traditional language learning really let me down.
Me too. I remember feeling totally unprepared when I had to give my first presentation in English.
The instructor actually shares a similar experience. She talks about how she used to dread public speaking
Uh-huh.
and how it would make her feel so anxious.
I can relate to that. I think a lot of people, even native speakers,
Yeah,
feel anxious about public speaking.
it's totally normal. And she realized that the problem wasn't her English, it was her lack of strategies and confidence.
Okay.
So she started studying those very things,
Like what?
techniques for managing anxiety, for engaging an audience,
Right.
for structuring a presentation effectively.
So did that make a difference for her?
She says it completely transformed her experience.
Wow.
She went from dreading public speaking to actually enjoying it.
That's awesome.
And she realized that these skills weren't just for native speakers.
Right.
They were essential for anyone
Yeah.
who wanted to communicate confidently regardless of their language level.
That's so empowering. It takes away that feeling of, oh, I can't do that because I'm not a native speaker.
Yeah.
Instead, it's like, hey, I can learn these skills and become a confident communicator even if I make a few mistakes along the way.
And I think that's what's so powerful about this whole approach.
Yeah.
It's about shifting the focus away from perfection
Right.
and towards confident communication.
Right.
It's about recognizing that everyone, regardless of their native language, has the potential to become a clear, confident, and engaging communicator.
It's almost like she's saying, let's stop comparing ourselves to some idealized native speaker and start focusing on developing our own unique voices.
I love that analogy. And, when you think about it, communication is so much more than just speaking perfectly correct English.
Absolutely.
It's about connecting with others,
Right.
expressing our ideas, and building relationships.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means letting go of the fear of making mistakes and allowing ourselves to be a little bit vulnerable.
It's like that quote from Nelson Mandela, courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it.
Ooh, I love that quote.
It's a good one.
And I think it applies so well to language learning. It takes courage to speak up,
Yeah.
especially when you're not confident. But that's where the real growth happens.
It's not just about overcoming fear, though. It's also about recognizing that those imperfections, those moments where we stumble or make a mistake,
Right.
can actually make us more relatable and engaging communicators.
Think about someone who speaks perfectly,
Yeah.
without any hesitation about errors.
Right.
It can sometimes come across as a little robotic or even a bit arrogant.
For sure.
But when someone's willing to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
to laugh at themselves, to admit that they don't know everything,
Right.
it makes them more likable and approachable.
It creates a sense of authenticity and connection. It's like you're saying, hey, I'm human, just like you. I make mistakes. I'm still learning, and that's okay.
And I think that's something that gets lost in that whole speak like a native mindset.
Right.
It creates this pressure to be perfect,
Yeah.
to erase all traces of our individuality.
To fit into a mold when you were meant to stand out.
When in reality, it's our unique voices and perspectives that make communication so interesting and meaningful.
100%.
And this brings us back to the point she made about the language learning market being flooded with that fear-based content.
It's like there's this whole industry built around making learners feel inadequate.
Highlighting their flaws and selling them this idea that they need to constantly strive for some unattainable standard of perfection. And it's not just the headlines, right?
Right.
It's the way so many language courses are structured
Yeah.
around this idea of avoiding mistakes, of getting everything right.
Like you're always one wrong word away from failure.
And honestly, I think it can be really paralyzing for learners.
It creates this constant anxiety about being judged,
Yeah?
about not being good enough. And when you're operating from that place of fear, it's almost impossible to truly relax and enjoy the process of learning and communicating.
You're so worried about making a mistake that you end up not speaking at all.
And the irony is that mistakes are actually essential for learning.
Right. They provide valuable feedback and help us identify areas where we need to grow.
It's like that famous quote, the only man who never makes a mistake is the man who never does anything.
So true.
Okay.
And she's really advocating for a shift in perspective.
I like that.
She's saying, let's embrace those mistakes. Let's reframe them as opportunities for learning and growth.
Instead of seeing them as failures.
Exactly. And she's not saying we should just throw grammar rules out the window.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that communication is about so much more than just technical accuracy.
It's about connecting with others.
Yes.
Expressing ourselves clearly.
Yeah.
And building relationships. And sometimes that means letting go of the need to be perfect and embracing the beauty of imperfection.
And, this whole idea of embracing imperfection reminds me of something else she talked about, the importance of cultivating a growth mindset.
Oh, yeah. A growth mindset is so important for any kind of learning, but especially language learning.
It's about seeing challenges as opportunities for growth
Right.
rather than as threats to our ego.
It's about recognizing that we're all works in progress, constantly evolving and learning.
And that's so liberating. It takes the pressure off of having to be perfect right now
Right.
and allows us to embrace the journey knowing that we will make mistakes.
Yeah.
We will stumble.
But we'll also learn and grow along the way.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so inspiring about her message.
What is it?
She's not just teaching English, she's teaching us how to become better communicators
Yeah.
and better learners.
It's about more than just the language.
She's helping us develop a more confident and resilient mindset
For sure.
that will serve us well in all areas of our lives.
It's about empowering learners to take ownership of their language journey and to approach it with a sense of curiosity,
Yes.
joy, and a willingness to embrace the inevitable bumps along the way.
And on that note, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll delve deeper into the specific strategies she suggests for cultivating this kind of confident, empowered mindset. And we'll continue to explore how this shift in focus can unlock greater fluency and ease in communication. Welcome back to our deep dive into the speak like a native mindset. I don't know about you, but I'm finding this whole conversation really eye-opening.
Me too. It's making me rethink so much about language learning and what it means to be fluent.
You know, one of the things that keeps coming up for me is this idea that the language learning market is kind of flooded with what the instructor calls fear-based content.
Yeah, it's almost like this underlying message that you're never good enough. You know, you always need to be like hyper aware of every possible mistake you could make.
It's not just the headlines either, right?
Yeah.
It's like the whole structure of so many language courses.
Right.
They're built around this idea of avoiding errors,
Yes.
getting everything right, which can be so intimidating.
Especially for beginners.
Yeah. You feel like you're walking on eggshells.
You're constantly worried about being judged or corrected.
And when you feel that kind of pressure, it's hard to relax and have fun and actually learn.
Totally. You're so afraid of making a mistake that you just end up not speaking at all.
And that's the real tragedy,
It is.
because mistakes are actually such valuable learning opportunities.
Absolute. How did you learn to ride a bike?
Oh man, I fell a lot.
Exactly. You fell off a bunch of times before you got the hang of it, right?
So many times.
And it's the same with language. Every
Yeah.
time we stumble or we make a mistake,
Yeah.
it's a chance to adjust, to refine our understanding,
Yeah.
and to get a little bit closer to fluency.
And this instructor actually challenges us to kind of reframe our whole perspective on mistakes.
Okay, I like that.
Instead of seeing them as failures, she encourages us to see them as stepping stones on the path to mastery.
I love that. It's about shifting from a fixed mindset,
Yeah.
where we believe our abilities are set in stone,
Right.
to a growth mindset, where we believe we can always learn and improve.
And a growth mindset is so important for language learning because it allows us to kind of embrace the challenges and setbacks as part of the journey.
Totally. It takes the pressure off
Yeah.
and allows us to focus on the process, knowing that we're constantly evolving and getting better.
I think that's such an empowering message, especially for learners who might be feeling discouraged or frustrated. It's like she's saying, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not be perfect. Just keep learning, keep growing, and you'll get there.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
And this whole conversation has made me reflect on how much of our communication anxiety comes from this fear of judgment,
Oh, for sure.
this need to be perceived as perfect.
It's like we're so worried about what other people will think of us that we kind of forget about the true purpose of communication,
Which is,
which is to connect,
yeah,
to share ideas, and to build relationships.
exactly. And sometimes that means letting go of the need to be right all the time
Right.
and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, to kind of express ourselves authentically, even if it means making a few grammatical errors along the way.
I think that's where the real magic of communication happens, when we let go of our inhibitions
Yeah,
and allow ourselves to be fully present,
yeah.
to connect with others on a human level.
It's about recognizing that those imperfections, those moments where we stumble or hesitate, can actually make us more relatable and endearing.
It's like that saying, to err is human, to forgive divine.
Ooh, I like that one.
I think that applies to language learning as well.
Yeah.
We need to be more forgiving of ourselves and recognize that we're all on this journey together.
And perfection is not the goal.
It's not. It's about connection,
Yes.
expression, and ultimately fluency. Not in the sense of speaking perfectly,
Yeah.
but in the sense of being able to communicate our ideas effectively and confidently.
And it brings us back to that question we posed earlier.
What was that?
What if focusing less on the technicalities of language and more on communication strategies and building that inner confidence actually unlocks a level of fluency and ease that we never thought possible.
I think the instructor's insights have really pointed us in that direction.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that true fluency is not about flawlessly mimicking a native speaker.
Right.
It's about finding your own voice
Yes.
and expressing yourself authentically, confidently, and joyfully.
It's about shifting from a place of fear and self-doubt to a place of empowerment and self-belief.
I love that.
It's about embracing the messy, beautiful, imperfect journey of language learning and trusting that we have the capacity to achieve our goals, even if it means taking a different path than what's traditionally prescribed.
So to everyone listening, what if you let go of that pressure to speak like a native and instead focused on developing those communication skills, building your confidence, and embracing the joy of simply connecting with others through language?
What new possibilities might open up for you? What breakthroughs might you experience?
We hope this deep dive has inspired you to rethink your approach to language learning and to embrace the power of your own unique voice.
Remember, confidence comes from within, and the ability to communicate effectively is a skill that can be cultivated and nurtured. So go out there, embrace the journey, and express yourself with confidence.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the Speak Like a Native mindset. We'll see you next time for another deep dive on the Deep Dive 2660.